So now we're going to cover 3 of the basic lettering styles, and the 3 we're going to cover are sans serif, serif, and script. And I will show you what these look like, but those are just the names of what I'm going to be drawing. So I'm going to start off with the sans serif style, and I'm just going to be drawing a random word that has a lot of the common letters that you're going to be using throughout whatever word you're going to be using. And so to start off, I'm going to throw some tracing paper on top of our basic structure that we just covered in the previous lesson and just draw on top of it. Now normally I would sketch out my letters and erase as I go with pencil and then go back over it with my microns or some sort of pen to ink it in. However, with the video, it's going to be a little bit harder to see the lead, so I'm going to go over it with pen, and hopefully you can see that a little bit better. So this is going to be the sans serif style. Sketching out is going to be the word verbs go human, and again, this is not going to make too much sense, but we'll just go with it so you can see some of the common letters that are used with whatever word you're using. So what I like to do with the sans serif style is it's very basic in that it has a low contrast and a lot of the strokes are geometric and rectangular. So you can do a lot of rectangles to create your sans serif lettering. So to start off, I'm going to go with a rectangle with the V. And with this one, I'm going to have it be a flat bottom. And if it was a pointed bottom, remember it would be overshooting that baseline. And then you can create another box. And there we have the V. Next we have E. And with all these, with this E, I'm going to overshoot the baseline because it has a curved bottom. If you can see that, it's a little bit past that baseline. But with all these, I sketch out the boundary of the letter and then go around until, because the edge is going to be the most important part rather than the middle. So there I have the edge of my E. Then I'm going to do the inside edge. And because it's sans serif, these are going to be generally the same size all the way around. So what I like to do is see the width of my first letter and just base my letters off of that width to keep a consistent width throughout. So again, I'm just eyeballing it and trying to match that weight as much as possible. And the overshooting concept also applies to the X height. See, the X height is not as apparent right away, but you can still overshoot that X height. And also this V, it also acts sort of like a curve because it has a lot of white space towards the end. And what you can do is treat it as a curve on curve, as we touched on in our spacing. The 2 O's are 1/3 of a space, and that's why this is a little bit closer, because this V acts like a curve. Next is the R. So I got my stem, and then we're going to go ahead and create this part of the R. And I am thinning it out a little bit. You want to, at the connection points where they meet stems, you can thin it out a little bit, because if you keep it the same width, it's going to look a little bit too heavy. So you're just kind of adjusting it visually to make it look a little bit better. Then we got the B, another stem. And as you can tell, these letters that have a little bit of a gap, and this as well, you can treat these as a curve. And so these have a lot of white space, so getting a little bit closer, this is more like a 2.5 of space, and then this is also a 2.5 space because this is a straight. Again, thinning it out towards the stem to make sure it doesn't get too heavy, and then going back to the regular width, and then coming back and thinning it a little bit more. And then we have the S, which is sometimes can be difficult. So we have what I like to do with my pencil that it's a little bit hard to do with the pen is just sketch a skeleton of the S, just one little stroke, and then you could fill it in on either side. So imagine that this dotted line that I'm about to draw is going to be the pencil mark that I draw as my skeleton. So I draw like a skeleton of the S. And then I go around that skeleton and keep that same width around. And then this S is curved, so I'm going to overshoot that bottom, the baseline, then come back around, fill that in. Now we have our S. It's a little hard to see because of that sketch mark, but let's move on to the G. Again, it's a curve on curve, so we're giving it a 1/3 of the full space. And you also want to thin it out towards the stem. So as you can see, we have our G, and it overshoots the baseline because it's curved, and then it also thins out towards the stem to make it look like it's not too bulky right here where the stems can meet together. And then also make it overshoot that X height. And we're going to move this over a little bit to give us a little bit more room. And the O, which is going to be overshooting the X height and the baseline. And since it's next to the G, a 2/3 space will be good. And see, with a pencil, it doesn't really matter how rough you get because then you could go over it with a pen, but that's the reason why my sketches look a little bit rough around the edges. You could also erase with your eraser pencil or just a regular eraser to get that fine detail before you ink it. All right, and then we have the H. Again, thin it towards the stem, overshoot that X height because it's curved, and then bring it back around and make it the same width as the stem, the first stem. And then we got a U. Again, overshoot that baseline and then thin it towards the next stem and then complete that second stem. And then we have M, similar to the U but upside down. Thin it towards the stem, then curve it around, overshoot the X height, bring it down, and complete that second stem, and then we'll just have we'll have a third stem that we add on to it. Again, thin it towards that stem, overshoot the X height, and then bring it around. See, it's thinner towards that stem, bring it around. Also to keep in mind is this white space. Try to make the white space even because our eye sort of picks up on that white space. So it's just as important as the actual letters themselves the white space is what we kind of recognize with subconsciously, so it's a good thing to craft those as well. And then we got the letter A. Again, you could thin it towards that stem, overshoot the baseline in the X height because it's curved, and then create that stem. And then lastly is an N, which is sort of like the U, just upside down. A stem. And then the curve, but thin towards that stem, overshoot that X height, bring it back around. And there you go. So there we go. Those are some of the most common letters that you'll find with a sans serif. And the reason why it's sans serif is because sans means without, and the serif are the little lines at the end of strokes that we're going to show in the next lettering style, which is serif. And the second style of lettering is serif style. And the serifs are these lines at the end of strokes of letters. And with the serif style, there's usually a higher contrast to these letters. So it's important to reference this. The thick and the thins of letters are going to apply with this style of lettering. So we're going to go ahead and sketch out that word again, starting with V. Similar to the sans serif style, there are going to be a lot of geometric and rectangular shapes that you can easily sketch out. And with this one, we're going to go with a pointed V this time, so we're going to overshoot that with the baseline. And then, so we have a thick downstroke, and then a thinner upstroke. And then the serifs go at the edge or the end of these strokes. And I'm over-exaggerating these a little bit just so you can see them. And then we have the E, and this is going to be overshooting the baseline and the X height. And then on the downstroke, this would be the downstroke. So it's going to be a little bit thinner or thicker, and then it's going to go up and be a little bit thinner. On the other side, it's going to come back around, go back to the regular weight, and because it's a horizontal line, this is going to be thinner. And I'm also over-exaggerating these so you could see the overshooting of the X height and the baseline. And then we have the R. Regular stem with a serif at the edges or the ends of that stroke. And then we're going to go up with the R, so it's going to be an upstroke. It's going to be thinner. It's going to come back around, overshoot that X height a little bit, come back around, and this terminal be a little bit thicker since it's on the downstroke. And then we have the B. And then we have serifs at the ends of those. And then thinner towards the stem, curves around, overshoots that X height, comes back around, overshoots that baseline, and gets a little bit thinner towards that stem, and then goes back, and you can create that thicker stroke. And then we have our S. Again, you could create that skeleton, overshoot that baseline and the X height because it's curved. and then you could fill in that skeleton. And I like to have these rounded terminals at the end, but you could do just a regular serif. So that's our S. Moving on to the G. Overshoot that X height and that baseline. Thin it out towards that stem. You could create that stem, and that has a serif at the end of that stroke. Curve it around, it thins out, and then it could go back to that terminal. Then we have a thick, go back and fill in that stroke to make it thicker, but then thin it out towards that second stem. Moving on to the O. It's going to be thicker on the sides and thinner on the bottoms. You could thin it out or overshoot that X height and then baseline. And then we have our H. Serifs at the end. And then thinner towards that stem. Bring it around, overshoot that X height. Bring it around, and then we have our serif at the end. Then moving over, we have a U. Comes around, overshoots that baseline, thins out towards the next stem, has a serif at the end of that stroke. Again, thin it out, then create that second stem, and serif at each end. And then we have our M. Serif at the ends, thin it out towards the stem, then curve it around, overshoot that X height, and then bring it back down towards that baseline. Create that second stem, and that serif at the bottom of that M. Then another one. Then we have an A. You bring that around, overshoot that baseline and that X height, thin it out towards the stem, and then create that second stem with a serif at both ends. And then finally the N. Stem with serifs, thin it out, overshoot that X height, bring it around, and meet it with the baseline with another serif. And that's how you do the serif style. And moving on to the script style. And the final lettering style is script style of lettering. And the script style has letters that are connected to each other. So that's going to be a different way to do lettering, but it also allows for a lot of letter interactions, which we'll talk about next. But also to keep in mind with the script style of lettering is the fact that they also have high contrast letters usually. So there's going to be a lot of thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes as well. So to start off, we'll do the V, which has a thick downstroke. or let's see. And we could also do the pointed V to overshoot that baseline. And then we could go back up with a thin upstroke. And what I like to do is just loop it around. You could also make this a little bit thicker since it's a downstroke, and then come back around. And so the next one we have is a V, or the V goes into an E. So the connection here would be to the crossbar of the E. So we'll just keep going straight. Horizontal lines are thinner, so it's going to work out like this, and we'll just bring it up, overshoot that X height, and then come back down, which will have a thicker downstroke. Overshoot that baseline and bring it up. And then we'll do the inside, thin on the top and the bottom, thick on the sides. And there we go. A little rough because it's pen, but this would be all filled in with ink afterwards. And then this E would go up into what would be the R. So we're just going to continue with this. It's going to go up, and with the R, usually the loop goes above that X height a little bit. You could come back, make it a little bit thicker, and then it, right where the X height is, it kind of goes straight, and then comes back down for that downstroke, and then go on the other side, and we can do that and finish that stroke. Overshoot that baseline just a little bit, and there we have it. There's also another way to do R, but this is more common with the script style of lettering. And then we'll go into the B. So this R then goes up into the stem of the B, but it loops around first, goes up to the cap height, and comes back around, loops around, overshoots that baseline, and comes back up towards the X height. And so we'll go back and add some weight to the stem of the B, thins out towards the bottom, then comes back and gets thicker. And then this will slightly loop around, but we could go back and add some more weight to the upstroke of this B. And there's B. Move this over a bit. S, similar to the R, it loops back around, but the loop goes a little bit above that X height and then comes back and creates a curved stem, and then overshoots that baseline a little bit. And from here, let's finish up that upstroke. So there's the S, but from there you can then take that S and loop it around to go into the G. Let's move this over. And then the stem, or this loop, goes into the bowl of the G. Again, overshoots that X height and that baseline. It's a little bit thicker at the stem, or the bowl. And then it has a stem as well. and this goes and loops around towards the bowl of the O as the connection. And then overshoot the baseline in the cap height, or the X height, and thick on the sides, thinner towards the bottom and the top. And this one you could loop around from the top of the O. From the top of the O, loop it out, loop it around towards the inside of the O, and then it goes into the stem, loops around towards the stem of the H, and gets a little bit thicker with the stem of the H. And with this upstroke, gets thinner, curves around, overshoots that X height again, and then loops back up and thins out, goes back to this U, and then this U, similar to the other U's, has a stem, then thins towards the next stem, and then we could bring it up into the bowl of the A, or actually this goes into the stem of the M, thins up, and then gets thicker on the down turn. And on the third stem, it loops a little bit up and into the bowl of the A. Thicker on the sides, overshoots the baseline in the X height, and it goes into the stem of the A, which the A then loops back up and creates the connection with the N. The N loops around, overshoots that X height, and then comes back down and creates that second stem of the N. And then you could even loop it up if you'd like. And there you go. That's the script style of lettering. So we could take a look at the three styles of lettering side by side. So as a quick recap, here's the script style of lettering. And then next we have the serif style. And then we have the sans serif style. And then this would just be the sketch of your lettering, and you would go back with a micron, as I've already done, and then you'd fill in with a permanent marker or some sort of black ink to fill in your sketch and complete those letters. Now that you have a better idea of the different types of lettering styles you can use, in the next lesson, we're going to cover the types of interactions you can create with your letters to make it more interesting and cohesive.